What do you do for a student who's really anxious about public speaking, or more likely, for students? Because this is a common problem amongst adolescents in schools today. How do you help them? Should you just not require them to speak, let them wait until they're comfortable? Do you just chuck them into the pool and hope that they swim? Is there some middle ground? Well, colleague, in this video, I want to show you how this is actually a really simple problem to solve. It's going to take some confidence on your part that what you're doing for your students is good. It's going to take some intentionality, some building up, but I think that your classroom can be similar to mine in that 99% of students can overcome debilitating public speaking anxiety and learn how to function in the face of it. So in my classroom practice, whole class speech always looks like a pop-up debate or discussion. Very simple format. Everyone has to speak in a pop-up debate at least one time. No one can speak more than twice unless I say otherwise. And to speak, you simply pop up at your desk, and when you're done, you sit down. So that mandatory speaking part kind of shows you my hand. I do require all of my students to speak publicly unless there's some type of documented IEP or 504 situation that says that they can't. And I've got about a 99% success rate getting kids to do this without a bunch of pushback. So how do you do that? Well, first, there's 3 weeks of practice using just Think, Pair, Share. In my classroom, Think, Pair, Share is almost always answering a question in writing, typically during a warm-up. This could be a get-to-know-you question or an academic question. Sharing your answer with the person sitting next to you verbally. And then I call on 4 or 5 students randomly to share what they've written and talked about with their partner. I use one of 2 methods to make sure that all of my students are getting called on at least once per week. I go through their stack of index cards, or I keep track on a clipboard tracker. But what's very important is that I can know that all of my students have been called on at least once, and they've all experienced at least once that in this class, public speaking is mandatory, but it's also safe. It's safe in that the teacher never cold calls, he warm calls, because think and pair, that gets you pretty darn warm. So he's not calling on you to get you or to shame you. It's also safe in that he does not allow crosstalk during student sharing. I'm strict on that. When someone has the floor, everyone else is listening. And as this is happening, students are experiencing the truth that no matter how anxious they feel, they can speak for the whole class to hear and not perish. So I do that same thing for another week and that same thing for yet another. 3 weeks total of Think, Pair, Share every day. Every student called on during share at least once. Now the stage is set. So we're in week 4 of the progression now. The students come in, they answer a warm-up in writing. Maybe it's what was the most important concept from the unit that we just finished, and explain your answer. And when the warm-up is complete, I say something like this to my students. I'm reading from page 219 of these 6 things. Over the past few weeks of school, we've been learning about our subject and practicing critical life skills. I've been asking you, what life skills are most important, and how do we develop these in ourselves prior to graduation? I've tried to impress on you the idea that these skills are not guaranteed, that if we want them, we're going to have to make sure that we work to get them. Today, I want us to practice one of the life skills that has been hardest for me to develop, the ability to speak in front of a whole group. So what we're going to do is use a structure that I call Popup Debate. It's pretty simple. Every student needs to speak at least one time. To speak, you'll simply stand up and speak. I'm not the referee, so you'll need to practice social intelligence by being polite and giving up the floor as necessary. So if 2 of you stand up at the same time, just politely decide who's going to go next. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that public speaking was a skill that I stumbled over for a long time. I was the kid in class who did not want to speak, thank you very much. And for most of my adult life, it's been a real struggle overcoming that. So today, if you're nervous, all you need to do is just stand up and read your 1-sentence answer to the first prompt we wrote about today. So to quickly recap, everyone speaks. To speak, you stand up where you are and start talking. If you're nervous, all you need to do is read a 1-sentence response to the prompt that we just wrote about. You can read it straight off your paper. If there's a lull in the debate, I call on my students because I don't want there to be a bunch of awkward pauses. And then I say, okay, let's go. I sit down, I grab my clipboard, And I just start putting check marks next to the names of students who have spoken. And as soon as they're a lull, I just pick a name and I say, okay, Keenan, go ahead. 90% of the time during this debate, I am looking at my clipboard. I'm emotionally neutral, face is neutral. I'm giving zero indication to the kids that they're being evaluated right now. All that I'm doing is facilitating everyone speaking. If a student hesitates when I call on them, I look at them with a gentle smile and I say, it's okay, Bailey. Just go ahead and stand up. Feel free to read from your paper. It's really important to preemptively de-escalate, to make these moments that could become power struggles as just vanilla as you can. If by the end of the debate you've got a lot of kids yawning, that's a good thing. We want this first one to be boring. Once the debate is over and everyone has spoken at least one time, there's a very important final thing to do, and that's this. From page 220 and 221 in these 6 things. All right, class, that was a good start. We are on our way. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you felt at least 1% nervous at some point during that debate? This is a key moment because I want the majority of the kids to raise their hands. That's why I phrase it as at least 1% nervous. And that's why I save our first pop-up debate for 4 weeks into the school year. Students need to be comfortable enough to be a little bit vulnerable here. When almost all the hands in the class shoot up, which they do every single time, something important happens, and I seek to capitalize on that. I say, wow, look at that. I want my shy and anxious students in the room right now to make note of all those hands, because I know that some of you felt sick to your stomach when I started class today by saying everyone was going to have to stand up and speak. Do you see how normal it is to feel nervous prior to public speaking? Do you also see how survivable the nervousness is? And so then we close by me asking them to discuss in pairs and share out what we do good as a class during our first pop-up debate and what could we do better. And I use this what could we do better list to pick what I want to work on in our next pop-up debate, where I want us to focus. And then really we're off to the races. I try to make sure to have at least another pop-up debate the next week and another one the week following, so that in this total 6-week progression, there's 3 weeks of Think, Pair, Share only, and then there's 3 weeks of pop-up debate, 1 debate per week. And typically by the end of that 6-week progression, all of your kids who maybe in previous years of school were horrified, petrified, sick to their stomachs, skipping school because of public speaking, they're now in. They've experienced it enough times to know it's a survivable thing, it's a safe thing, and it's a little bit fun. So please try this and let me know in the comments, how does it work for you? What other stuff do you do to help make fear of public speaking less of a thing in your class, less of a specter in your students' lives? I can't wait to hear. Cheers.